Ambassador Keth Varan stood before the great window of Concord Station and watched the stars. He had served the Galactic Assembly for 300 years. He had seen wars begin and end. He had watched empires rise and fall. But he had never felt fear like this. The message had arrived 1 hour ago. The species called humans had finally built ships that could travel faster than light. This was not unexpected. The Assembly had watched Earth for 2 centuries. They had studied the humans carefully. They had classified them as dangerous but primitive. The humans fought wars among themselves. They destroyed their own planet. They were violent and unpredictable, but they were also trapped on their small blue world. They could not reach the stars. They could not threaten anyone. Until now. Keth Varan turned away from the window and walked toward the grand chamber. The other ambassadors were already gathering. He could hear their voices through the walls. Some were angry. Some were afraid. All of them were confused. The Veloxi ambassador was speaking when Keth Varan entered. Her name was Threxan, and she was tall and thin with skin like polished metal. The Veloxi had always feared the humans most of all. "We must act now," Threxan said. Her voice was sharp and cold. "We have waited too long already. The humans are a threat to everything we have built. We should have destroyed them centuries ago." "And how would we explain that to the younger races?" asked Elder Mothral of the Morathi. He was ancient, even by galactic standards. His fur had turned white long ago, and his eyes held the weight of 10,000 years. "We do not destroy primitive species. That is our law. Laws can change," Threxan replied. "So can civilizations," Mothral said quietly, "usually for the worse." Keth Varan took his seat among the other ambassadors. There were representatives from 4,000 species in this room. Some were small and delicate. Some were massive and powerful. Some breathed oxygen. Some breathed methane. They had almost nothing in common except for one thing. They all remembered the humans. The Assembly had first detected human radio signals 200 years ago. They had sent observers to study the strange species on the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. What they found had disturbed them deeply. Humans were not like other species. Most civilizations developed slowly. They learned peace before they learned war. They built communities before they built weapons. They understood cooperation before they understood competition. Humans did everything backward. They invented the sword before the plow. They split the atom before they fed their hungry. They reached for the stars while their own world burned, and yet they survived. Again and again, they survived. They fought wars that should have destroyed them. They created disasters that should have ended them. But they kept going. They kept building. They kept reaching. The Assembly had debated what to do about the humans for 2 centuries. Some wanted to contact them. Some wanted to contain them. Some wanted to destroy them. In the end, they had chosen to do nothing. They would wait and watch. They would let the humans destroy themselves. But the humans had not destroyed themselves. A warning alarm filled the chamber. Every ambassador fell silent. The great screen at the center of the room flickered to life, showing a star map of Assembly space. A cluster of red dots appeared at the edge of the map. "Long-range sensors have detected ships entering our territory," announced the station computer. 300 vessels. Configuration unknown. Origin. Sol system. 300 ships. Keth Varan felt his heart stop. The humans had not sent a single explorer. They had not sent a small diplomatic mission. They had sent a fleet. "This is an invasion," Threxan declared. "I told you this would happen. I warned you all." "Wait," said Mothral. "Let us see what they do." They watched the red dots move deeper into Assembly space. The ships were fast. Faster than anything the Assembly had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, like a single organism with 300 bodies, and then they stopped. The fleet came to rest at the edge of a region called the Outer Reaches. It was empty space. There was nothing there of value. No planets, no resources, no strategic importance. "Why would they stop there?" asked one of the younger ambassadors. Before anyone could answer, a transmission filled the chamber. It was audio only. The voice spoke in a language that the translation system struggled to process. But slowly, the words became clear. "This is Admiral Helena Vance of the human Starfleet. We come in peace, but we do not come as supplicants. We come seeking the harvest worlds. We know what you have hidden. We know what you have done. And we will not be silent." The chamber erupted in chaos. Ambassadors shouted at each other. Some demanded immediate military response. Others called for negotiation. But Keth Varan noticed something strange. The oldest ambassadors were not shouting. They were not demanding anything. They were sitting in silence, and their faces were pale with fear. Keth Varan knew the Assembly's history better than most. He knew about the wars and the treaties. He knew about the alliances and the betrayals. But he had never heard of the Harvest Worlds. He did not know what the humans were talking about. He looked at Elder Mothral. The ancient Emhorathi was staring at the screen with an expression that Keth Varan had never seen before. It was not fear exactly. It was something deeper. It was shame. Elder, Keth Varan said quietly. What are the Harvest Worlds? Mothral did not answer for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. They are our greatest sin, he said. They are the secret that built this assembly. And if the humans know about them, then everything we have created is about to fall apart. The transmission from the human fleet continued. Admiral Vance's voice was calm and steady. She did not sound angry. She did not sound afraid. She sounded like someone who had been waiting a very long time for this moment. You have 30 cycles to respond, she said. After that, we will share what we know with every species in this galaxy. The choice is yours. You can face your past with courage, or you can watch it destroy your future. The transmission ended. The chamber fell silent. Keth Varan looked out the window at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, 300 human ships were waiting. They had crossed the void between stars. They had found secrets that should have been impossible to find. And they had come not with weapons drawn, but with questions that demanded answers. For the first time in his long life, Keth Varan wondered if the Assembly had been wrong about the humans. Perhaps they were not primitives at all. Perhaps they were something far more dangerous. Perhaps they were exactly what the galaxy needed. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the HSS Prometheus and watched the stars spin slowly past the observation window. Behind her, 300 ships waited in perfect formation. Inside those ships were the hopes and fears of an entire species. But Helena was not thinking about her fleet. She was thinking about her grandfather. Marcus Vance had been a farmer in Kansas. He had lived a simple life. He had grown wheat and raised cattle and married his high school sweetheart. He had expected to die on the same land where he was born. Then the lights came. Marcus was taken on a warm summer night in 1987. He was gone for 30 years. When he returned, he was an old man with white hair and empty eyes. He had stories that no one believed. He had scars that no doctor could explain. And he had star charts burned into his memory like brands on cattle. The Harvest Worlds. 12 planets scattered across the galaxy. 12 places where the Assembly's founding species had conducted experiments on what they called lesser beings. Humans had been taken there for 50,000 years. They had been studied. They had been modified. They had been bred like animals. Some had escaped. Most had not. Marcus Vance spent the last 20 years of his life building a network. He found other survivors. He gathered their stories. He collected their evidence. And he passed everything to his granddaughter with a single request. Find them, he had said on his deathbed. Find our people. Bring them home. Helena had dedicated her life to that promise. She had joined the military. She had risen through the ranks. She had helped design the first human faster-than-light engines, and when the Prometheus was ready to fly, she had been the obvious choice to command it. Admiral, said Commander Chen from the tactical station, the Assembly has dispatched a fleet. 800 warships. They will arrive in 6 hours. Helena nodded. She had expected this. Any communication? Yes, Admiral. They are demanding that we withdraw immediately. They say we have violated sovereign space. They say we will be destroyed if we do not comply. Helena smiled. It was not a happy smile. Open a channel to High Arbiter Genkal. The main screen flickered to life. The High Arbiter was a Veloxy, tall and silver and completely without expression. Her eyes were like black mirrors reflecting nothing but cold calculation. Human Admiral, Genkal said, you have made a grave mistake. Your fleet is impressive for a primitive species, but it cannot stand against 800 Assembly warships. You will withdraw now, or you will be destroyed. Helena clasped her hands behind her back. High Arbiter, I appreciate your concern for our safety, but I think you misunderstand our purpose here. Your purpose is irrelevant. You have violated our space. You have made threats against the Assembly. We have done nothing except tell the truth, Helena interrupted. And I think the truth is what frightens you most of all. Genkal's expression did not change, but Helena noticed a slight tremor in her silver hands. You know nothing of truth. I know about the harvest worlds, Helena said. I know about Planet 7, where my grandfather spent 30 years as a test subject. I know about Planet 3, where human women were forced to breed with genetic modifications. I know about Planet 11, where children were raised in isolation to study the effects of loneliness on developing minds. She paused and let her words sink in. I know everything, High Arbiter. And soon, so will the galaxy. Genkal was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different. The cold confidence was gone. In its place was something that sounded almost like desperation. What do you want? Helena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. In 30 cycles, this information will be transmitted to every unaligned species in the galaxy. In 60 cycles, it will reach your civilian populations. Every citizen of every assembly world will learn what their leaders have done in their name. She held up the chip. Unless you choose differently, you are blackmailing the Galactic Assembly, Genkal said. No, Helena replied. I am giving you a choice. The same choice you never gave my people. She pressed a button on her command chair. The main screen split into dozens of smaller images. Each image showed the inside of a different ship in the human fleet, but they were not warships. They were transports. And inside each transport were thousands of people. Some were human, some were not. All of them bore the scars of the harvest worlds. These are the people we have rescued over the past 60 years, Helena said. 800,000 survivors from 12 worlds of horror. They are the reason we came. Not for revenge, not for war. For them. Genkal stared at the images. For the first time, her perfect composure cracked. How did you find them? How did you bring them here? Your security was not as perfect as you believed, Helena said. And human stubbornness is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength. She ended the transmission and turned to Commander Chen. Prepare the refugee ships for possible combat. If the assembly attacks, our warships will cover their escape. Admiral, Chen said quietly. If they attack with 800 ships, we cannot win. I know, Helena replied. But we can buy time. And time is all our people need. She looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, 800 enemy warships were approaching. Somewhere out there, the most powerful civilization in the galaxy was deciding whether to bury its secrets in blood. But Helena was not afraid. She had seen what fear could do. She had seen it in her grandfather's eyes every night as the memories consumed him. She had seen it in the faces of the survivors they had rescued from hell. Fear was what had built the harvest worlds. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the different. Fear of anything that could not be controlled. Helena had made a different choice. She had chosen hope over fear. She had chosen truth over silence. She had chosen to believe that even the darkest secrets could not survive the light. The assembly fleet would arrive in 6 hours. 800 warships against 300 human ships. The odds were terrible, but Helena Vance had never believed in odds. She believed in people. She believed in the stubborn, impossible, beautiful refusal of human beings to accept defeat, and she believed that somewhere in that approaching fleet, there were aliens who felt the same way. She was right. Tethsan had always believed in the assembly. She had grown up hearing stories about the great civilization that had brought peace to the galaxy. She had studied its history at the finest universities on her homeworld. She had written papers praising its wisdom and its justice. Now she sat alone in her small office on Concord Station and stared at her computer screen. The data the humans had transmitted was displayed before her, page after page of evidence, thousands of testimonies, medical records, genetic analyses, photographs that made her stomach turn. The harvest worlds were real. Everything the humans had said was true. Tethsan was a Mharathi. Her people had helped found the assembly 10,000 years ago. They were known throughout the galaxy as scholars and philosophers. They had written the laws that governed 1,000 species. They had built the institutions that maintained peace across 10,000 worlds. And they had participated in horrors beyond imagination. She scrolled through the records with trembling hands. The earliest experiments had begun 50,000 years ago. The founders had discovered primitive species on dozens of worlds. They had seen potential in these creatures. They had seen raw material, so they had taken them. The harvest worlds were hidden in a region of space that appeared empty on all standard maps. 12 planets, each dedicated to a different kind of research: genetic modification, psychological conditioning, biological weapons testing. The records went on and on. Humans had been a favorite subject. They were resilient. They adapted quickly. They could survive conditions that killed other species. The researchers had found them endlessly fascinating. Tethsan closed her eyes. She could not read anymore, but she could not forget what she had already seen. A knock came at her door. She quickly closed the files on her screen. Enter. Ambassador Kethvaran stepped into her office. He looked tired. Everyone on the station looked tired now. The human fleet had been waiting for 3 days. The assembly fleet had arrived but had not attacked. Both sides were watching each other across the void, waiting for something to break. You have seen the data, Kethvaran said. It was not a question. Tethsan nodded. I have verified much of it. The genetic markers match. The astronomical coordinates are accurate. The testimonies are consistent across thousands of sources. And your conclusion? It is true, she whispered. All of it. The harvest worlds are real. Kethvaran sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. The assembly is falling apart. 17 species have withdrawn their ships from the defensive fleet. They refuse to fight the humans until they receive answers. They deserve answers, Tethsan said. Yes, Kethvaran agreed. But answers will not hold the assembly together. The Veloxi are already calling for war. They say the humans must be destroyed before they can spread their lies any further. They are not lies. The Veloxi do not care about truth. They care about power. And right now, they are afraid of losing it. Tethsan stood and walked to her window. She could see the distant lights of the human fleet, tiny points of brightness against the endless dark. What will happen? She asked. I do not know, Kethvaran admitted. The Grand Council is meeting now, but there is no agreement. Some want to apologize. Some want to fight. Some want to pretend none of this is happening. And the humans? What do they want? That is the strangest part, Kethvaran said. They do not seem to want revenge. Admiral Vance has made no demands for punishment. She has not asked for reparations. She has only asked for one thing. What? Recognition. She wants the assembly to admit what it has done. She wants the harvest worlds to be shut down, and she wants her people to be free to build new lives without fear. Tethsan turned to look at him. That is all? That is all? She did not understand. If her people had suffered what the humans had suffered, she would want blood. She would want the ones responsible to pay for their crimes. She would want justice. But perhaps the humans understood something she did not. Perhaps they knew that revenge would only create more victims. Perhaps they had learned that the cycle of violence had to end somewhere. Or perhaps they were simply tired. The station shook suddenly. Alarms began to sound throughout the corridors. Kethvaran jumped to his feet. What is happening? They ran together to the observation deck. Through the great windows, they could see the assembly fleet moving. But it was not moving toward the humans. It was splitting apart. Dozens of ships were breaking formation. They were turning their weapons toward each other. The Veloxi. Kethvaran breathed. They are attacking the ships that withdrew. Tethsan watched in horror as the first shots were fired. Bright beams of energy cut across the darkness. Ships exploded in silence. Thousands of lives ended in an instant. They would rather destroy the assembly than face their shame, she said. The human fleet began to move. Tethsan expected them to flee. They were outnumbered. They had no reason to stay. But instead of retreating, the human ships flew directly into the battle. What are they doing? She asked. The answer came in the form of a transmission broadcast on all frequencies. Admiral Vance's voice filled the observation deck. This is Admiral Vance to all ships. We are not your enemy. We are here to help. Any vessel in distress, regardless of species, will receive assistance from the human fleet. We do not wish to see any more death today. Tethsan watched as human ships positioned themselves between the warring factions. They did not fire. They simply placed themselves in the line of fire, blocking shots and shielding damaged vessels. It made no sense. These were the same species that the assembly had tortured for 50,000 years. These were the people who had every right to hate, and yet they were risking their lives to save their enemies. I do not understand, Kethvaran said. Tethsan thought about what she had read in the human testimonies. The survivors had spoken of hope. They had spoken of forgiveness. They had spoken of building something better than the world that had hurt them. She had thought they were foolish. Now she wondered if they were wise. "I think I do," she said quietly. "They are showing us who they are. They are showing us what they could have become. And they are giving us a choice." "What choice?" Teth San looked at the human ships flying through fire to save strangers. "The choice to be better than we were." The battle continued for 3 hours. When it was over, 47 ships had been destroyed. But the human fleet had saved over 200 vessels that would have died without their help. The galaxy would never forget what they saw that day. The humans had come with weapons, but they had fought with mercy. They had faced hatred with compassion. They had answered violence with grace, and slowly, impossibly, the assembly began to change. The medical bay of the HSS Prometheus was filled with the wounded and the dying. They came from every species in the galaxy. Veloxi soldiers lay beside Morathi civilians. Silthene engineers shared beds with creatures whose names the human doctors could not pronounce. Dr. Samuel Okonjo moved between the beds with practiced efficiency. He had been a doctor for 40 years. He had seen every kind of injury that war could create, but he had never expected to treat the same species that had once treated him like an animal. Samuel had been born on Harvest World 7. He had never seen Earth. He had never known what it meant to be free. For the first 30 years of his life, he had been a test subject. The researchers had modified his genes. They had enhanced his intelligence. They had given him perfect memory and immunity to 100 diseases. They had also tortured him in ways that still haunted his dreams. The rescue ships had found him when he was 32 years old. Human operatives had infiltrated the Harvest World and smuggled him out along with 300 others. It had taken him years to learn how to live as a person instead of a specimen. Now he was saving the lives of people who looked just like his torturers. A young Veloxi soldier grabbed his arm as he passed. The soldier was badly burned. Half his silver skin had been melted by weapons fire. He would not survive much longer. "Why?" the soldier whispered. "Why are you helping me?" Samuel looked at the dying alien. He remembered the Veloxi researchers on Harvest World 7. He remembered their cold eyes and their steady hands as they cut into his flesh. He remembered screaming until his voice was gone. "Because someone has to be the first to stop hating," Samuel said. The soldier stared at him for a long moment. Then his eyes closed, and his breathing stopped. Samuel noted the time of death and moved on to the next patient. Admiral Vance found him an hour later. She looked exhausted. Her uniform was stained with blood and smoke, but her eyes were clear and determined. "The assembly has agreed to talks," she said. "They want to meet aboard Concord Station." Samuel set down his medical scanner. "All of them? The Veloxi remnant has refused. They have retreated to their home systems. But the rest of the founding species have agreed to hear us. What will you say?" Helena sat down on an empty bed. She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I have been thinking about my grandfather," she finally said. "He spent 30 years in hell. He lost everything. His family thought he was dead. His life was stolen from him, and when he finally escaped, do you know what he told me?" Samuel shook his head. "He said he did not want revenge. He said revenge was just another prison. He wanted something harder than revenge. He wanted to make sure it never happened again." She looked at Samuel with tired eyes. "That is what I am going to tell them. We did not come here to punish them. We came here to change them." The talks began the next day. Admiral Vance stood before the Grand Council of the Galactic Assembly. Behind her stood survivors from every Harvest World. They were human and alien alike. They were young and old. They were united by nothing except their shared suffering. Helena spoke for 3 hours. She told the assembly about the Harvest Worlds. She showed them evidence that could not be denied. She introduced survivors who told their stories in their own words. And then she did something that no one expected. "We do not ask for revenge," she said. "We do not ask for punishment. Those things will not heal the wounds of 50,000 years. They will only create new wounds." She paused and looked around the chamber at the thousands of ambassadors who watched her in silence. "We ask for something harder than revenge. We ask you to change. We ask you to admit what was done. We ask you to close the Harvest Worlds forever. We ask you to build a galaxy where no species is treated as less than another." Elder Mothral rose slowly from his seat. His ancient face was wet with tears. "Admiral Vance," he said, "my people were among the founders of the Harvest World program. We told ourselves it was for science. We told ourselves it was for progress. We told ourselves that the suffering of a few was justified by the benefit to many." He bowed his head in shame. "We were wrong. We were monsters. and no apology can ever undo what we have done. No, Helena agreed. It cannot. But that is not what we are asking for. Then what do you want from us? Helena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a seed. A simple wheat seed from Earth. My grandfather was a farmer, she said. He taught me that you cannot change the past. You cannot undo a harvest that has already been gathered. But you can plant new seeds. You can grow something different. She held up the seed for all to see. We are establishing a colony in unclaimed space. A place where survivors can build new lives. A place where every species is welcome. We call it remembrance, because we must never forget what happened. But we also call it hope, because we choose to believe in what can be. She looked directly at Mothral. Anyone who wants to help us build something better is welcome to join us. We do not care what your species did in the past. We only care what you choose to do now. The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, Mothral walked down from his seat. He crossed the floor until he stood before Admiral Vance, and then the ancient Mhorathi, leader of one of the galaxy's founding species, knelt before a human. I will come, he said. My people will come. We will help you build your world, and we will spend the rest of our lives trying to deserve your forgiveness. One by one, other ambassadors rose and walked forward. They came from dozens of species. Some had been involved in the Harvest World program. Some had only just learned of its existence, but all of them wanted to be part of something new. By the end of the day, 43 species had pledged their support to the human colony. 16,000 individuals had requested permission to join the first wave of settlers. The Galactic Assembly would never be the same. It had been broken by its own sins. But from its pieces, something new was beginning to grow. Helena Vance looked at the seed in her hand and smiled. Her grandfather had been right. You could not change the harvest of the past, but you could always plant again. 1 year had passed since the human fleet first arrived at Concord Station. 1 year since the secrets of the Harvest Worlds had been revealed. 1 year since the galaxy had begun to change. Tethsan stood at the window of her new classroom and watched the sun rise over the colony world called Remembrance. The light was golden and warm, much like the light on her Morathi homeworld. But this world was different. This world was new. The colony had grown faster than anyone had expected. What had started as 800,000 refugees was now a thriving civilization of 2.3 million souls. Humans made up about half the population. The rest came from 43 different species. They had come from every corner of the galaxy, drawn by the promise of something better. Tethsan had been among the first to arrive. She had left behind her prestigious position at the Assembly Archives. She had given up her comfortable apartment on Concord Station. She had traded everything she knew for a small house on a strange world and a job teaching history to children. It was the best decision she had ever made. The door opened behind her, and her students began to file in. They were a strange and wonderful mix. Human children sat beside Morathi cubs. Silthine younglings shared tables with species that Tethsan had never even seen before. They did not see each other as different. They saw each other as friends. Good morning, class, Tethsan said. Today we are going to talk about why this colony exists. Does anyone know why we call our world Remembrance? A young human boy raised his hand. His name was Marcus, named after Admiral Vance's grandfather. Because we have to remember what happened, he said. So it never happens again. That is correct, Tethsan said. But there is another reason too. Does anyone else know? A small Morathi girl spoke up. Her fur was still soft with youth, and her eyes were bright with curiosity. Because remembering helps us forgive, Tethsan smiled. Very good, Sela. Memory is not just about holding on to the past. It is about understanding the past, so we can build a better future. She activated the display screen at the front of the classroom. Images appeared showing the Harvest Worlds as they had been 1 year ago. Dark corridors, cold laboratories, empty cells where living beings had been kept like specimens. These places are closed now, Tethsan said. The Assembly voted to shut them down permanently. The survivors have been freed. Many of them live here with us. She changed the image to show Remembrance as it looked today. Green fields and tall buildings. Parks where children played. Markets where 100 species traded goods and shared stories. This is what we built instead. Not through anger or revenge. Through choice. Through hope. The lesson continued for another hour. Tethsan taught her students about the history of the Harvest Worlds, and the courage of the humans who had exposed them. She taught them about Admiral Vance and Dr. Okonjo and the thousands of others who had risked everything for truth. When the class ended, the children ran out to play in the courtyard. Teth-san watched them go with a feeling of deep contentment. These children would grow up in a different galaxy than the one she had known. They would never know a world where some species were considered lesser than others. They would never learn to look down on those who were different. A knock came at her classroom door. She turned to find Ambassador Keth Voran standing in the entrance. He had changed much in the past year. The formal robes of his office were gone, replaced by simple workers' clothes. His proud bearing had softened into something more humble. "Ambassador," Teth-san said, "I did not expect to see you here." "Please," he said. "Just Keth. I am not an ambassador anymore." He walked into the classroom and looked at the drawings the children had made on the walls. Bright colors and simple shapes, showing people of different species holding hands and working together. "Governor Vance has asked me to deliver a message," he said. "The second fleet is almost ready." Teth-san nodded. She had heard the rumors. "They are going to look for others?" "Yes, the galaxy is large. There may be other species who were taken to worlds we have not yet found. There may be survivors we have not yet rescued. And they want volunteers?" Keth smiled. "They want you specifically. Governor Vance says she needs historians on the mission. People who can document what they find. People who can tell the stories that deserve to be told." Teth-san looked around her classroom. She had built a good life here. She had students who needed her. She had a home and friends and purpose. But she also remembered what Admiral Vance had said 1 year ago. They had come to find their people and bring them home. That mission was not finished. It would never be finished as long as there were still lost souls waiting to be found. "When do they leave?" she asked. "In 3 months." Teth-san thought about it for only a moment. "Tell the governor I will be ready." The second fleet launched on a warm morning in early spring. 12 ships crewed by members of every species in the colony. They carried scientists and doctors and soldiers. They carried historians and diplomats and ordinary citizens who wanted to help. At the front of the fleet flew the HSS Prometheus, still commanded by Admiral Helena Vance. She was older now. There were lines on her face that had not been there a year ago, but her eyes still held the same determined light. Beside her on the bridge stood Dr. Samuel Okonjo. He had closed his hospital on remembrance to join the mission. He had trained dozens of doctors to take his place, but this work was too important to leave to others. "Admiral," said Commander Chen. "We are approaching the jump point." Helena nodded. "Take us out." The fleet accelerated toward the stars. Behind them, the world of remembrance grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another point of light in the endless dark. But it was not alone. Scattered across that darkness were millions of people who now knew the truth. Millions of people who had chosen to build something better. Millions of people who refused to let the past determine the future. The galaxy had watched the human Starfleet arrive. They had expected war. They had expected destruction. They had expected everything they had always feared about the violent primitives from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. Instead, they had seen something unforeseen. They had seen compassion in the face of cruelty. They had seen mercy in the face of hatred. They had seen hope in the face of despair. And slowly, impossibly, they had begun to change. Teth-san stood at the observation window as the fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched into lines of light and then vanished entirely. They were traveling to unknown regions now. They were searching for people who did not know that rescue was coming. She thought about the children in her classroom, the ones who saw each other as friends instead of strangers, the ones who would grow up in a galaxy transformed by human stubbornness and human hope. The unforeseen was still unfolding. It would continue to unfold for generations to come.